刘培元的英文教室正确发音篇啊，从经典演说中练习正确发音啊，这是麦克阿瑟，美国五星上将，蒋介石也是五星上将，那时候20大战五星战有8、9个吧，全世界啊，老兵不死啊，只有凋零啊，这下，所以你从上面听啊，我们这只是练习发音啊，所以你听我发音啊，然后你跟着学啊，你可以反复的听啊。这是只念啊，但意思它这一篇比较难啊，所以你意思如果不懂的话，你就去看我这个前面频道上面有经典演说篇啊，那上面这个我在里面有解释啊，那这边就不解释啊，只是念啊，重点在发音啊，这是下集，我们继续念。To understand the changes which now appear upon the Chinese mainland,One must understand the changes in Chinese character and the culture over the past 50 years. China, up to 50 years ago, was completely non-homogeneous, being compartmented into groups divided against each other. The word-making tendency was almost non-existent, as they still followed the tenets of the Confucianism ideal pacifist culture.At the turn of the century, under the regime of Chang Hwa, effort toward greater homogeneity produced a start of nationalist urge. This was further and more successfully developed under the leadership of Chiang Kai-shek, and has been brought to its greatest fruition under the present regime to the point that it has now taken a character of united nationalism or increasingly dominant aggressive tendencies. Through these past 50 years, the Chinese people have thus become militarized in their concepts and in their ideals. They now constitute excellent soldiers with competent staffs and commanders. This has produced a new and dominant power in Asia, which, for its own purposes, is allied with Soviet Russia, but which, in its own concepts and methods, has become aggressively imperialistic, with a lost expansion and increased power normal to its type of imperialism. This is a little of the ideological concept, either one way or another, in the Chinese makeup. The standard of living is so low, and the capital accumulation has been so thoroughly dissipated by war that the masses are desperate and eager to follow any leadership which seem to promise the elevation of local stringencies. I have from the beginning believed that the Chinese Communist support of North Korea was the dominant one. Their interests are at present parallel with those of the Soviet. But I believe that aggressiveness recently displayed not only in Korea, but also in Indochina, in Tibet, and pointing potentially toward the south, reflects predominantly the same lust for the expansion of power, which has animated every would-be conqueror since the beginning of time. The Japanese people, since the war, have undergone the greatest reformation recorded in modern history. With a commendable will, eagerness to learn, and moral capacity to understand, they have, from the ashes left in the war's wake, erected in Japan an edifice dedicated to the supremacy of individual liberty and personal dignity. In ensuring process, there has been created a truly representative government committed to the advance of political morality, freedom, economic enterprise, and social justice. Politically, economically, and socially, Japan is now abreast of many free nations on earth, and will not again fail the universal trust. That is may be counted upon to wield a profoundly beneficial influence over the course of events in Asia, is attested by the magnificent manner in which the Japanese people have met the recent challenge award, arrest, and confusion surrounding them from the outside and check communism within their own frontiers without the slightest slackening in their forward progress. I sent 4 of our occupation divisions to the Korean battlefront without slightest qualms as to the effect of resulting power that can upon Japan. The results fully justify my faith. I know of no nation more serene, orderly, and industrious, nor in which higher hopes can be entertained for future constructive service in the advance of the human race. Of our former word, the Philippines, we can look forward in confidence that existing unrest will be corrected, and a strong and a healthy nation will grow in the long aftermath of war's terrible destructiveness. We must be patient and understanding and never fail them, as in our hour of need they did not fail us. A Christian nation, the Philippines stand as a mighty bulwark of Christianity in the Far East. Its capacity for high normal leadership in Asia is unlimited. On Formosa, the government of the Republic of China has had the opportunity to refute by action much of the malicious gossip which so undermined the strength of his leadership on the Chinese mainland. The Formosan people receiving a just, enlightened administration with majority representation on the organs of government, and politically, economically, and socially they appear to be advancing along sound and constructive lines. With this brief insight into the surrounding areas, I now turn to the Korean conflict. While I was not consulted prior to the President's decision to intervene in support of the Republic of Korea, the decision from the military standpoint proved a sound one. As we as I said, it proved a sound one as we hurled back the invader and decimated his forces. Our victory was complete and our objectives within reach when Red China intervened with numerically superior ground forces. This created a new world and an entirely new situation. A situation not contemplated when our forces were committed against the North Korean invaders. A situation which called for new decisions in the diplomatic sphere to permit a realistic adjustment of military strategy. Such decisions have not been forthcoming. While no man in his right mind will advocate sending our ground troops into continental China, and such was never given a thought, the new situation did urgently demand a drastic revision of strategic planning if our political aim was to defeat this new enemy as we had defeated the old. Apart from the military need, as I saw it, to neutralize the sanctuary protection given the enemy north of Yalu, I found the military necessity in the conduct of war made necessary. First, the intensification of our economic blockade against China. 2. The imposition of naval blockade against the China coast. 3. Removal of restrictions of air reconnaissance of China's coastal areas in Manchuria. 4. Removal of restrictions on the forces of the Republic of China on Formosa, with logistical support to contribute to their effective operations against the common enemy. For entertaining these views, I professionally designed to support our forces committed to Korea and bring hostilities to an end with the least possible delay and at the saving of countless American and allied lives. I have been severely criticized in lay circles, principally abroad, despite my understanding that from the military standpoint, the above views have been fully shared in the past by practically every military leader concerned with the Korean campaign, including our own Joint Chiefs of Staff. I called for reinforcements, but was informed that reinforcements were not available. I made it clear that if not permitted to destroy the enemy build-up bases north of Yalu, if not permitted to utilize the friendly Chinese force of some 600,000 men of Formosa, if not permitted to blockade the China coast to prevent the Chinese rats from getting suckered from without, and if there were to be no hope, major reinforcements, the position of command from a military standpoint forbade victory. We could hold in Korea by constant maneuver and in a proximity area where the supply line advantages were in balance with the supply line disadvantages of the enemy. But we could hope the best for only an indecisive campaign with the terrible and constant attrition upon our forces if the enemy utilized the full military potential. I have constantly called for the new political decisions essential to a solution. Efforts have been made to distort my position. It has been said, in fact, that I was a warmonger. Nothing could be further from the truth. I know word as few other men now living know it, and nothing to me is more revolting. I have long advocated its complete abolition, and its very destructiveness on both front and foe has rendered it unless as a means of settling international disputes. Indeed, on the second day of September 1945, just following the surrender of the Japanese nation on the battleship Missouri, I formally caution as follows. Men since the beginning of time have sought peace. Various methods through the ages have been attempted to devise an international process to prevent or settle disputes between nations. From the very start, workable methods were found insofar as individual citizens were concerned, but the mechanics of an instrumentality of larger international scope had never been successful. Military alliances, balances of power, leagues nations, and in turn failed, leaving the only path to be by way of the crucible war. The utter destructiveness of war now blocks out the alternative. We have at our last a chance. It will not devise some greater and more equitable system. Armageddon will be at our door. The problem basically is theological and involves the spiritual recrudescences and improvement of human character that were synchronized with our almost matchless advances in science, art, literature, and all material and cultural developments of the past 2,000 years. It must be of the spirit if we are to save the flesh. But once war is forced upon us, there is no other alternative than to apply every available means to bring it to a swift end. War's very objective is victory, not prolonged indecision. In war, there is no substitute for victory. There are some who, for varying reasons, would appease Red China. They are blind to history's clear lesson. For history teaches with unmistakable emphasis that appeasement but begins new and bloodier war. It points to no single instance where this end has justified the means, where appeasement has led to more than a sham peace. Like a blackmail, it lays the basis for new and successfully greater demands until, as in blackmail, violence becomes the only other alternative. Why, my soldiers ask me, surrender military advantages to the enemy in the field? I could not answer. Some may say to avoid the spread of the conflict into an all-out war with China, others to avoid Soviet intervention. Neither explanation seemed valid, but China is already engaging with the maximum power it can commit, and the Soviet will not necessarily match its actions with our moves, like a cobra, any new enemy will more likely strike whenever it feels that the relativity in military or other potential is in the favor of worldwide basis. The strategic career is further heightened by the fact that military action is confined to its territorial limits. It condemns the nation, which is our purpose to save, to suffer the devastating impact of food, naval, and air bombardment when the enemy's sanctuaries are fully protected from such attack and devastation. Of the nations of the world, Korea alone, up to now, is the sole one which is risked as though against communism. The magnificence of courage and fortitude of the Korean people defies description. They have chosen to risk deaths rather than slavery. The last words to me were, "Don't scuttle the Pacific." I've just left your fighting sons in Korea. They have met old tests there, and I can report to you without reservation that they are splendid in every way. It was my constant effort to preserve them and end this savage conflict honorably and with the least loss of time and the minimum sacrifice of life. Its growing bloodshed has caused me the deepest anguish and anxiety. Those gallant men will remain often in my thoughts and in my prayers always. I'm closing my 52 years military service. When I joined the Army, even before the turn of the century, it was the fulfillment of all of my boyish hopes and dreams. The world has turned over many times since I took the oath of playing at West Point, and the hopes and dreams have long since vanished. But I still remember the refrain of one of the most popular barrack ballads of that day, which proclaimed most proudly that old soldiers never die, they just fade away. Unlike the old soldiers of that ballad, I now close my military career and just fade away. And those soldiers should try to do his duty as God save him, the light to see that duty. Goodbye. 这篇比较长，分上下。这样念完你可以反复听，希望对你的英文发音有帮助。讲到这里。